Yeah, which, if you look at that tax levy requirements report by department, most of them did increase their reserves. We still have a ways to go,
Right.
but the smaller independent departments, their decline is not their fault. General fund and public safety are the two we really need to put some attention to.
Right. Okay. All right, good. I think that's probably something we need to talk about this budget cycle, see if we can start working on that.
Yeah, I think we're gonna wanna set some goals
Yeah.
and make sure we follow those, set them in stone.
These guys need to have a reserve to fall back on.
Yeah,
Some of the stuff is too unpredictable.
yeah, no question about it.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions on the expenditures?
Not from me.
I, see some areas where we need to
Yeah,
watch and probably
Yeah.
have some conversations with some folks, but kind of overall, keep it at 74% right now.
it makes it easier for me to have one or two instead of 5 or 6.
Right.
So people are working, they're trying,
Mhm.
and some of it's just the nature of the beast.
Okay.
Revenues is a little harder in that we don't have our May's taxes yet. So statistically, we should be at 50% or more in our revenues received. If in theory, everybody that owes taxes pays at least their first half. Or grants, we're halfway through the year, we should have at least half a year's worth of grants. Anything over is great. Just means we got more than we anticipated. So the general fund overall, 73%, so we're doing pretty good. If you look at the individual subcategories, whether it's findings or charges for services, that's where you're gonna see variances. But as far as property taxes, 59%, that's more than half, so that's good. Miscellaneous revenues were over more than we thought we were gonna get. So that was all good. The only one that, I know I'm gonna have to work on is the county nurse one. And we've ran into this a couple of times with when they receipt money in, they've been putting it all under the general fund county nurse, but some of it's for immunization and MCH, which she had in those budgets to cover some of the expenses. So that's one of those I have to do an individual budget amendment to take it from the one account to the other. And a lot of that has to do with the medications, knowing what they are makes it easy to change. Teresa's been okay with that in the past. There's just so much going on in billing. It's just, I think they find it easier just to put it in the general fund rather than the other accounts.
One of the things too to point out, right on top of county nurses, subdivision reviews. I think something that a lot of people don't understand, and we had a little bit of misunderstanding on this last year. Many of the subdivision reviews that are done, the revenue does not go back to the planning department, it goes into the general fund. So our planning department is not realizing their own income to sustain that department. And that's one of the reasons that we've had to start working on a plan to solidify planning, because their revenue is going to support the general fund, which they are not in. So that's something we'll have to be keeping an eye on and talking about, I think, in this next budget.
I know there's one of them tied to the subdivisions that the two of them share. But I think it's when a survey is finalized and there's a plat's approved and the subdivision is ready to go, is the only time they collect on that fee. So while you might have 20 in the works until they're actual final and they start building, they don't get to collect those fees. So that, last year that was a big hiccup for planning because there was so many pending that didn't get finalized during the fiscal year that she didn't have all the revenue she thought she was gonna have, so. And just one note, I'll have to change the PILT. This was one of those last minute, when we finalized the budget, where it shows revenue to be received for the general fund from PILT. That, I need to take that out of there, because it wasn't going into general fund. That was the amount that PILT agreed to pay those that were short on the mills, which was fair, museum, search and rescue, and airport. And that was one of those last minute ones we changed to make them whole. But I forgot to go in here and take it out of there. We got the money in the funds from PILT to the right funds, but it was included in general fund and it shouldn't have been.
And Daryl, to bring you up to speed, that was the year we took the reserves from those smaller departments and general fund
All right.
and gave it to public safety,
Public
law
safety,
enforcement.
Yeah, right.
And the deal was we would reinstate that money to those funds from PILT the following year,
Yeah,
which is what that is.
I remember you guys talking about that. Okay.
And at the time it got thrown into general fund and it shouldn't have been, and I missed it at the last minute, so that I'll have to just add that to a budget amendment to decrease that as it went to other funds where it was supposed to, and clean up clerical oversight.
Okay.
The other one too, the Forest Reserve Act for roads. I haven't seen anything on that yet. And usually it doesn't come in till towards the end of the year.
See,
So
we
it
haven't
doesn't
seen
show any
anything on it
revenue.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was panicking, thinking I didn't get put in the right place. But in the past, is that worksheet where there's the forest reserves, and they split it, and then some of it goes to road, and the rest goes to schools. This would have been his portion, but I haven't seen anything yet. So it's another one of those end of the year type payments that I hope is coming, and they didn't take it away. I haven't seen anything they've taken away, but I haven't seen when it's coming either. But yeah, 59% taxes. So any the tax portion, I think we're doing pretty good on most of them, because we're about 59% for most of them, and then the other fees and charges for services. That's why the spotted the airport interlocal 14,000. That's one I got to follow up on, like we talked about before. And so like district court fees, she's got 62% of her revenue. She's looking pretty good. Mosquito, 63%, so they're doing good on. Those revenues, yeah, that's not too much on those, but. Oh, and like on planning, she's not getting mills this year, but it's showing revenue. That there's a couple of accounts funds like that, and that's people who owed taxes in the year that there were taxes to pay and they didn't pay. So it's kind of like late taxes that have come in, and so they've come in and it's going to plus penalties and interest for being late. So those at the end of the year, we'll have a little amendment to add budgeted authority to them. Because like this year, planning didn't have any tax revenue. We didn't have any mills because it was revenues from the turn lanes and proceeds equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
But there is revenue for taxes, and that's prior years. Somebody who didn't pay their taxes or pay them all, and then they come in, or a property sold and somebody pays the taxes, it still has to go in there.
Oh, okay.
So if it was taxes that were milled in 2017, because that's when we had a tax on planning, mills, like 2 1/4 mills or whatever, and how that's some of those that we don't get. We've talked about, we're like short 10%, 5%. It's for those that don't pay all their taxes and they owe it, so it still goes in because it's for that year. They're paying interest. So it helps her, it just didn't give her spending authority, which I have to give.
Okay. Not bad overall, though.
Yeah. So that's what some of those little are, because the other one, like, is the emergency disaster. Well, we haven't had that since we had fires. Why is there still tax money? Well, it's because whoever paid it didn't pay it when they owed it. So now they're coming in and paying it. So it goes in there and it just stays in there till we have another disaster emergency and we charge mills. That's one I can't do anything with.
I see that on quite a few of
Mhm.
these accounts, okay.
Mhm.
That makes sense, yep.
Yeah, and anything where you see, like the account penalties and interest on delinquent taxes, that's hard to budget for. Nancy Everson, in teaching me, said you don't have to divvy out those because that's something that's done on the treasurer side. And the percent, there's no way you could budget for that each line. So just do taxes overall and then whatever comes in, and he separates those out, should come up with your budgeted total. So that's what we follow. But when you see those those negative numbers, that's, we've got more money there than we had budgeted for. But yeah, it's,
Did we not put 5 mil or 0.5 mils into community development a couple of years ago? Did that get dropped this year somehow?
well, we took it from that community development line item, the 20, what was it? 23, 21, into planning.
Oh, okay.
And combined them because she's now community development planning.
you
And so
said
she's
she-
got 3 accounts.
You said she didn't get any mills this year? Did
No,
she get that 0.5?
Planning, no, we didn't give planning anything. And that was just a 1-year thing that we did, because
Oh,
everything was merged.
I think it was supposed to be, and we missed it last year, so we can fix it this year, but I think it was supposed to be an annual thing, to start building that department. But I think you're right, I think we changed it this year to pay from PILT, but I think that part should be the 1 year, and that's maybe something we need to discuss in
Okay.
the budget. So you're right, Debbie, you're 100% right on that, I just, wanted to clarify,
Well, and
so thank you.
if that was supposed to transfer to her, I missed it too.
No, I think this year we did PILT, but this past year was the anomaly. So we'll have to remember that for next
Okay.
year.
Okay.
And maybe we reevaluate that in total with taking the revenue and leaving that in planning.
So what I do every year, since this fund has kind of gone away, by the end of the year, any money that has come in, that year we had mills, is being transferred to the planning.
Perfect.
So she is getting that little bit. But moving forward, yeah, we'll have to discuss that.
All right, yeah, I just need
I
a
think I
clarification
didn't
for my
understand that.
memory.
And so the group health, where both the groups have been permissive, we're right about where we should be for revenue. So that's, come the end of the year, how I'll have to look at that for budget amendment. Museum, they're doing good, 59%. Most everybody's at 59%. 58. Yeah, see the gas tax, the BARSA, the 28-21, shows we've got revenue. And that's what made me question, were we to have spent it somewhere? Because I didn't show anything spent.
Okay,
Yeah, and see 911, we've only got about 46% of the revenues. 42% for the actual revenue. And that's what made me wonder if we've over budgeted and we're gonna get less this year. I've gone out and looked and there's nothing, anything, anywhere. Don't know if they're not communicating with or if they've made changes and just. I don't have any information on that one. And of course, PILT, we don't get that usually like till the last day of June. So that shows we have a lot of unclaimed revenue yet to receive. Brooke, when I talked to her on her grant, I guess there was some name changes or something paperwork wise that's prevented her from getting some of her money that she's been working on trying to get fixed. Didn't cross a T when she dotted it and something, or they changed something, I forget what she said. But she's had struggles with that, so she's still not received all of her revenue so far to date.
I think along with that, talking with those folks, part of it is the management system that they use now that's with the state is not gonna be supported anymore. So we need to look at possibly a new case management program for them in this upcoming, or maybe if there's revenue at the end of this year to help them with that. But that's something I have to talk about.
Yeah, we need those details.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, might be of this issue.
And that would likely
Might
also
be.
be a Board of Crime Control grant
That could be.
for those reporting systems.
Yeah.
There's a whole section for
Yeah.
those kinds of expenses, because they're expensive.
They are expensive.
Yeah,
And if you don't have it, then your paperwork doesn't work.
right,
And so-
right. So I would pursue grants number one, because then it's less burden on taxpayers.
Because with her existing grant, this is, I mean, she's basically never has much left from one year to the next. And if she doesn't get all her revenue that she thinks from fees and surcharges, grant money timely, it's hard on her budget.
Yeah, okay.
And I know we struggled last year with it. And I'm concerned right now, we're gonna have some more struggles at the end of the year. And paperwork's not her favorite thing, so, at least not the finance part of things, she tells me that every day. So, I wanna stay on top of that one, just because it is a little more complicated than some of the other ones.
Right.
Yeah, and MCH, they've only at 48%, but that's some of that grant money, billing. You know, we talked about billing, health clinic charges, because I think the county has to provide 75% versus the grant is 25%, which she thought she could do in billing, but there's that overlap in immunization, WIC, how much of that, and that's where I think in the years past, she's lumped it all under general fund for the reimbursements for services. That's why hers is not showing anything on that line item. It's all under public health, general fund, but shows she's got like 14,000 more than she budgeted to get, which just goes to MCH immunization. Well, hopefully by the end of the year, but that's another one of those, I gotta go look up some more.
Sure.
They're all, yeah, it's like the Deep Creek, I think we budgeted to get more money than we're gonna get, so that'll be an amendment to reduce the revenue receiving. Outside of that, most of the CIPs are just investment earnings on money they have sitting out there and saved. So there's so much, Doug has put the interest as it comes in that we didn't budget for, because we never know what the interest is gonna be. So at the end of the year, there'll be a final to the CIPs for the final revenue received. So the vehicle the sheriff was talking about, I think that's what they're looking at, is they got the money in their CIP for it when it gets here.
Yeah.
So, just have to make sure that that's the fund that they charge, or we'll do a journal, fix it. The others are just the CIPs. The only thing in the solid waste that kind of jumped out at me was disposal charges and container rentals. I think we were really, had high goals. And in reality, they were probably too high. So they only show barely any revenue for those two. So overall, solid waste is only showing 49% revenue. And like salvage of junk and sale, that one's only at 4%. That was, I think, a lofty, we could get all this and sell it and get more as they screen the garbage, I think was the idea.
I think it's a good plan, it's just gonna take longer than
Yeah.
the amount of time we have to implement it.
And then I think we were, we guessed a little high on the revenue we could get.
Sure.
That's why, your best guess doesn't always hit the mark. And this was a tough one last year at last minute.
Right.
So we'll have to watch that because I'll have to do some amendment towards the end of the year, depending on what kind of revenues we do or don't get.
One of the things I want to point out with the silos is budget authority was 3,300 to spend. What has been spent year to date is about $1,050 more, which is $4,489. But if you look at the revenue received year to date is 12,000. So I think what we need to do to keep that from being in the negative is just put a higher original appropriation there, because we have the revenue to balance that. I wish the same story could be told with the other account. So anything in the cash balances, Debbie, that jump out at you that we should be watching or concerned with?
No, because most of them, trying to remember, I just looked at this last week, I didn't get it done yesterday. There was only a few that were in the negative, and there's some that tie to grants
With the lagging
with the
payments?
lag and how the payments go, but for the most part, I know solid waste is one that we have to watch. That one's, we know. And the Deep Creeks, we know we have to, there's some cleanup work on those before the year's up. But for the most part, their cash balances actually look pretty good.
Okay.
So here's the thing that jumps out at me after, looking at this a little bit deeper is how much this kind of relies on grants to keep it running. I mean, that does kind of concern me a little bit, looking into the future. Those grants aren't guaranteed,
Nothing's guaranteed, that's the
and,
thing, yeah.
so,
Yeah. The thing with grants, I am a fan of grants. And the reason is any time a department head has an opportunity to pay for their operations with grants, it doesn't put a further burden on the taxpayer.
well, I think they're great,
Yeah,
but there's always some type of qualifier.
because no money is free, right?
Yep,
So you're either going to be taking it from somebody via taxes,
yep,
or you're gonna be using somebody else's money, but they're gonna tell you what they want it used on.
right.
Yeah, so grants are tough, there's no question about it.
Mhm.
But to say because they're harder, you know, and I've heard this from people, because they're harder, we don't wanna do it. Well, when the alternative is taking it from taxpayers, I'm gonna say, I expect the harder work
No,
to be
and
done.
I agree, I mean, we have to go after all the grants that are available to us.
Right,
I guess my point is those grants may not be there someday,
right,
and then that decision here as a commission will probably be a tougher decision to make in regards to how we fund our departments,
mhm,
because our revenue source is not there.
right. Which is where your focus on the reserves comes in.
Right.
That gives you the planning time that you need to kind of fill that gap. So, yeah, I think your goal of the reserves is spot on.
All right, thank you, Debbie.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, Debbie.
Mr. Chairman, just a real quick question. There was reference to some of the amendments that may be needed will be contingent, if you will, I hope I don't use the wrong word, on the recommendations from the audit and some changes that might be needed to be made. Is the audit yet available? Because we were told that it would be available the first of this month, and I haven't really checked back if it's here or not.
It is
So,
posted
if
on the
it is-
website. It is posted on the website. We're still trying to get it to be accepted. The Department of Admin did not like a couple of responses that we gave. They wanted more detail. So we're trying to get that detail into them so they'll accept it. But it is out on the website. I did go look.
Okay,
But it's just not been accepted of, does that make sense? It's there, it's just not been accepted in full, meaning they're not recognizing it as complete yet, because they haven't accepted it.
okay, so there is.
But it is out there, it's not gonna change anything as far as what we submit or put out there, so what you see is there. They just didn't like our responses, and until they accept it as not considered done,
Okay,
does that make sense?
all right.
So, but
Thank
it is
you.
out on that local government website I sent you. When you were in, to look at other years' budgets, reports, audits, that same link.
So it should be up there for
Mhm,
2017, 18.
Yeah, for the current year, the one that we just finished that was to be out there posted.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah.
Okay, we will move on to the working meeting with Gary Sullivan. This has been canceled. Great Tech has pulled their ranch off the listing, is that proper?
That's what I was informed last night, and no longer wanting to sell it to the Fish, Wildlife and Parks. So I don't have any idea the reason why, or what plans they have in the future. But I know that we have some folks here that want to make some comments, so.
So does anybody want to make any comments, or?
Hey Kelly, good to see you.
My name is Kelly Flynn, and I'm a rancher here in Broadwater County. And yes, I heard yesterday that the Great Tech pulled the offer. But I think it's important for the commissioners to get a feeling from the folks that are out in the country that are the farmers and ranchers in Broadwater County, and to see how that could potentially affect Broadwater County ranchers and farmers. Originally, when I talked to Gary Sullivan, he asked how we could improve this potential purchase. And I mentioned some things that were really important for ranchers and farmers in Broadwater County. And one thing that's very important are property tax values. And what happens is if the value that somebody has for a purchase of land becomes a very high value, it essentially affects every farmer and rancher in Broadwater County. And agriculture struggles as it is. And when they asked me, what do you think about the value? I explained some of the comps that were out there, and the comps were much lower than the comps that they were talking about valuing the land. They talked about values of purchasing this land for between $1,400 and $1,900 per acre. For grazing land in Broadwater County, those are not the values of that land. And so what happens is, it effectively puts those costs eventually, because it can become a comp, on all the farmers and ranchers in Broadwater County. The second thing that we talked about is weed control in Broadwater County is a very important thing. And in my lifetime, when you live next to government agencies having land, even though we have a weed law in Montana that says if there is a private property owner next to you, that essentially you can go through the process and force them to pay for the weeds. That is not the case with government ground. And in my lifetime, and I think in the lifetime of many of the ranchers and farmers who have come in here, they would say the same thing. On the public ground in this county, they do not take care of the ground. And so that is some concern when you have a government agency take over the ground. You don't have the same force of law that you have when there is a private property owner next to you. They talked about some other things that, is it going to be good for the public? And of course, I think those are not really germane to what we're talking about today. Our concern, and I hope I convey it to the commissioner, is if that had gone through, it stood the possibility of increasing the cost to every farmer and rancher in Broadwater County. So I would caution the commissioners on that. This was the only time that I saw a notice that this was on an agenda. And I think one of the other things that I was concerned about is hearing through the grapevine that potentially there were commissioners supporting this transaction without really having the feedback from those up in the agricultural community. And so it is my hope that the commissioners will take a very close view if things like this come forward and see how it will impact the people who in Broadwater County have made their livelihood here and are spending dollars in the community and want to stay on the land for time and time on again. So thank you for allowing me to come forward.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Tim?
Tim Ravendall, as a citizen and a property owner, I am absolutely in agreement with Mr. Flynn that sometimes when we look at the recreational aspect, which I think is the foundation of the push for what we've seen, not only going on across the lake now with this pending, but look at what we've seen in the Elkhorn Mountains. We have lost industry due to the same type of programming where the wildlife management unit status created in the Elkhorn Mountains has removed all timber resource management, has drastically reduced grazing, which has caused fire issues. We've also lost mining opportunities, which are basic resource foundational industries that have supported this county and could continue to do so. So it's really important to make sure that we don't start throwing these places like that into what is known in the world that I live in as a de facto wilderness. Because once it becomes that, weed control is no longer taken care of. Access for fire, access for range management are lost. And we need to be careful that as we move forward to make sure that we don't lose that opportunity and the ability to manage the lands locally, because when it comes from the top down, we lose every time. And with that said, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Kelly?
One last thing, a lot of folks here have not stood up. With the commissioner's permission, I would like to ask if there's any people in this room who are standing up in support of that transaction, if that transaction were going through. And if they don't want to get up and talk, if they would at least give their name and say whether they opposed it or supported it.
Anyone here that supports it?
No, not me.
Everybody opposes? Okay.
One follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
You know, one of the advertisements that I've seen is the purchase of the property, if you will, has been really highly endorsed by Montana Wildlife Federation and Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Now, these two entities have kind of evolved into a, I guess you could say, a real estate business where they're making money off of this. And one of the things we found, I spent over 10 years with multiple youth association working to try and make sure that people had a seat at the table here in Broadwater County. And one of the things that we found was Montana Wildlife Federation spends about 50 weeks a year promoting things that impact private property. And the rest, the other 4 or 5 weeks of the year are spent to promote recreation and hunting and fishing and wildlife opportunities. And one of the things that we've seen here in Broadwater County is just exactly that. We need to make sure that we are aware of that and don't allow that to step out into the front of the bus, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Kelly?
For the record, I think it's only fitting that the people here may at least list their name and their representation if they opposed it.
Okay.
I have a question, Kelly. Where do they get the comps? Because I've got the ad that I just gave to Carol where they're asking, what, 7 million for that place? What is it? 10 million. And yeah, there's a great big house there, but then there's, what, 5,000 acres? I can't read that. But, you know, I saw this growing up as a child way back east. I came from what you wouldn't think of as being rural if you, but northern New Jersey was rural. And there were people who had beautiful herds of sheep and cattle, prize cattle, you know, they were just gorgeous. You can look at the ground there and something grows. And my dad raised apples, and he fought very hard as the unpaid mayor in our township to not get people taxed out. But you could see all of these gorgeous farms being sold because of people in other areas because they couldn't afford the taxes. And so they just gave up and sold, and, you know, the developers came in. We had very tight minimum zoning and, you know, where I lived, but it's sad to see that happen, and just because somebody can't afford to pay the taxes. And that's what always bothers me with these comps. You know, what do we do to try to protect your ranchers too?
If the question, to the commissioners, I think the question is to me, can I answer the question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, because I don't understand it.
I think we do have private property rights, and people do have the right to do what they want with that property. I think we have to be careful on who has the deepest pockets, and sometimes it's an artificial deep pocket. And what has happened with that program is there is a very large deep pocket. When this transaction, which started to come up the year before, and they asked me about it, at first the landowner was going to only keep a small piece of property with the large house. And I told them that if it was going to be better for the public, I thought that the public should have the entire piece of property, because the landowner was going to withhold one of the actual best security places for the elk. not only did that change, it changed so the landowner decided he wanted a larger piece of property. So essentially, the value to the public was going to be reduced. And when they asked me, how could you make it better for the public? I said, I think if you were to do it, you would need to have the whole thing. So then that the public would have access to the whole thing. Second thing I said is I think you have to have something on the weeds to control noxious weeds. And third, I said, I think you're gonna have to watch that we don't pay too much value for this. I think it should be commensurate with what really is the appraised value for the land in Broadwater County. And that's where deep pockets really make a difference. When your government has the deep pockets, it puts a pressure on every single one, as I've already mentioned, the working farmers and ranchers in this county. And so, I don't know if you would solve it. I think we just have to have, I wanted to have the commissioners aware of it, because it may look really good for the public, but it would not be very good for the farmers and ranchers if the value was way above the appraised value for that property in Broadwater County.
Thanks.
Yes,
I'm
Cheryl?
Carol Plamo, and I would like to oppose this sale. I'd like to oppose the GT.
Yes, Toby?
I am Toby Dundas, and I oppose also. I agree with Kelly and Tim. And another thing, just not the weeds, the fencing and there's just owning the land doesn't put an end to it. There's a lot of maintenance that goes on with owning land. And on another note, I'm also, nobody likes to elk hunt more than I do and be out in the mountains, but you turn 100 pickups loose and 300 hunters, in 2 days there won't be any elk there anyway. And they were gonna oppose lion hunting on it also for winter range security. And there's less than 10% of the elk winter there anyway. Especially if you don't allow lion hunt. I could kill a lion there just about every day of the week. So I agree with what's already been said. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby.
I'm Chuck Hondo, and I'll speak on two levels. I'm a local rancher, and I have to agree with what Kelly and Toby have already said about land values and the things that go with the acquisition of private lands by federal agencies. It's become the mentality of they want to get a hold of that property because somebody else is gonna buy it. It's private property, as Kelly said. Anybody can sell their lands and for whatever price they choose to. The agencies do have very deep pockets. And when they acquire that land, they don't always look at the infrastructure that's necessary to be financed afterwards. And you see that with the agencies, that you see it with Iron Mask property. It was bought through the Conservation Fund, which was the same one that was coming for this. And it went, I don't remember for sure how many years it's been since it was acquired. It has never had another livestock grazed on it. It was difficult to get weeds controlled. We fought long and hard as private individuals against BLM, who was the final owner of the Iron Mask property, to treat private property as it was before when it was private property. That they take care of their share of the fences. They do the same thing that a private landowner would do to another private landowner. With that said, I'm also co-chair of the CAB, which is the Citizens Board for the Montana Fish and Wildlife Conservation Trust. The trust that was formed when the cabin sites were sold at the north end of the lake, and we, by law, were funded to have an escrow fund of, started out as $14 million, it's now up to around $25 million. And that fund is used to acquire properties that are accessible by the public, for fish, wildlife, habitat, that sort of thing. And I sit as a citizen or the landowner advocate on that board. And through time, I have advocated that when they buy a property, they have to buy it at fair market value. But they're always able to come up with some comp somewhere or an appraisal that shows that the price they're paying is fair market value. And in that case, they do continue to raise the price of lands and make it more difficult for agriculture to compete. And these rural counties, agriculture is still the major base. Subdivision does not pay its way. Subdivision there should be a process in place for subdivisions where the costs that are gonna happen are paid up front. So once land is subdivided, the taxation should be a different. It still gets taxed as agricultural ground, but those are things that state law, whatever law it is that controls it, is what's in place now. But those are just things that I see as a rancher, an individual, a citizen of the county, and also as a board member that has sat on that trust board for 20 years and has advocated for some of these things happening and that need to happen if agencies are continuing to acquire this land. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Darrell Baum, and I ranch in the Winston area, and I pretty much agree with all these gentlemen have said. I ranch in the Elkhorns up there, and I guess I feel that the private property is protected enough, mostly because of the wildlife management unit. The weeds is the biggest problem up there. There's no timber management to go along with it. And I guess I don't believe you can manage wildlife without managing other resources on the ground. And anyway, the land values too is one thing that I oppose on this acquisition. We'd have to go through it. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Josie?
I'm Josie Reynolds. I'm here on behalf of the Thompson Ranch and also the Broadwater Conservation District. And I emailed you guys a letter and showing the Conservation District's comments towards being opposed to the sale of the GT Ranch. Were you all able to see that letter?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess if you have any questions, I have 2 board members here as well, so, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I got a question, if I can, please. So we got a great cross-section of our farm and ranch community here. And so this issue may come before the commission again. So my question is, how do we balance the rights of the property owner against, what's gonna happen? And I wanna change this scenario just a little bit. So say it's not a government agency that's buying this piece of property. Say it's another individual that has deep pockets. And he's buying it as a recreational piece of property for himself. I can see the same scenario unfolding. What would you see our role as a commission in stepping in between those 2 individuals and their property rights to either buy or sell land? I guess I'm asking for your input. How would we do that?
I think, Commissioner, the issue is a little bit different. And the reason it's different is because, one, you have a private-to-private sale.
Okay.
Another, you have a private-to-government sale.
Okay, and I guess that was kind of where I was going. So,
Yeah.
so really, the major heartburn is the government's involvement, not so much if it was a private landowner selling.
I think,
Is that-
in my
is that- is
case,
that fair?
I would
Is that
say
fair?
that is the case.
Okay,
And I will also offer that the landowner who is next to the GT, who is Tom O'Donnell, opposed this very same transaction. The second thing that is the difference between the two is because when you have a private landowner next to you, you still have the ability on weeds to go to the weed board and force them to take care of the weeds if possible. You don't have that ability to do that with these government agencies. Basically, they are able to not take care and steward the land. So yes, I know that's going to come up. We all know that's going to come up. But I think that's the issue for you as commissioners is, it's difference between private and private, private and government. And we still have some safeguards if that private landowner who, yes, all of us feel that they should be stewarding the land and often do not, we at least have some resource to go and say, yes, you have to take care of the land.
Right, and I understand that. So in regards to changing the land values, it probably isn't gonna make a difference, whether it was a government agency that paid the inflated price or some other private individual. Is that right? We still can't dodge that bullet.
Correct.
Yes, yeah.
Just a follow-up on your question, Commissioner, one of the things that is also really important to remember is if this goes from the private property ownership to government ownership, Broadwater County loses a big chunk of taxable value.
I actually think that
And so that's the other side.
there was a provision there that the state would still, it would be similar to like a PILT payment that we get from the, they would still make that payment. I mean, and that was kind of the whole idea. I was hoping that Gary would show up, was an informational thing for everybody, so that we kind of knew really what was gonna happen, but that's not gonna happen, so it may in the future. And like I say, I have no idea what's gonna happen, if it's gonna be another private landowner or another government agency that wants to take a look at this, I don't know. But your input helps us when that time comes, so. Kelly?
One follow-up to that is, traditionally, even if another private landowner bought it, what has happened with farms and ranches, it's not just the taxes on the land, it's the taxes on the equipment. And so that's where you lose out in another income source that would be coming to Broadwater County. Now, it's true, that private person that bought it may not have tractors on there or equipment, but in most cases, they would. And so we would be losing, again, some values from business equipment tax.
And livestock.
And livestock, yeah, you're right.
Chuck?
The one thing I'd like to convey to the commissioners is that when these acquisitions come up where it is private to government, that you guys carry a lot of weight in whether you back it or not. If you have a project come before you and you decide you wanna back it, but let's say it's going to either the BLM eventually, and you may not always see that when it comes to you. It'll be one of the funds that comes to you, the Rocky Mountain Health Foundation, Conservation Fund, whoever. But ask ultimately who that agency is gonna be that's gonna be the final owner. Because you take the BLM or you take the Forest Service, who were both created under government acts. The BLM under the Taylor Grazing Act and the Forest Service under the Forest Service Act. And it gives them the ability to say to the private individual next to them, you keep up all the fences, your cattle get on us, you're gonna be trespassed. They have a lot of leverage. If they're gonna end up with those lands through an acquisition that is funded through grants or whatever, use some leverage and say, okay, treat that land as it was when it was private lands. Keep your share of the fences up, take care of your weeds. Don't fall back on this, that, well, it's going into government ownership, that it should fall under the same process that it did when it was formed as the Forest Service or as the BLM. These are different lands, this is a different situation. So use your leverage that way to, you may not change anything, but at least use your leverage and say, okay, is there a way that you guys are going to manage this land? Take care of the things that need through infrastructure. Have you got a plan in place that you have the infrastructure already guaranteed, that you have money to fund it? Because they'll say, oh, we can't do it more than 1 year at a time. We can't guarantee you a year more than a year at a time. So if they can't do that, why should they have that land?
Yes, Scott?
I'd like to thank the commissioners for giving us an opportunity to at least express a viewpoint from the ag community. We thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You bet.
Thanks for coming, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's no other comments? Josie, did we get that letter from you?
I emailed it.
Did I send it to you guys? I thought I sent
No,
that on to you guys.
I didn't get it.
Did you sent it to the whole commission, didn't you?
Yeah, I sent it
Oh,
to you
okay.
and the whole commission, but
I'm
I
pretty
have
sure-
one copy I can give you right now.
Yeah, if you would, please. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Daryl.
you. Kelly, good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
I guess if there's nothing else, I guess we will adjourn.
Oh, I do have one small thing. Email from Larissa Spencer, Swanson. She wants to do, and we've done this, we have a history, I sent you an email with it. In fact, Sarah was part of it. Years ago, we did a flag display of the people who were victims of domestic violence, and it was in the grass just across the street in Memorial Park. Larissa would like to do a pinwheel display. I touched base with Mike Myers, because I wanted to make sure that if she did that, we gave the okay, it didn't compromise what he wanted to do as far as maintenance
Yeah.
and getting ready for spring. He told me he's already given her the okay, it's fine with him, so I just wanted to know if it's good with you guys.
Good with
Sure.
me.
All right, cool.
Do
Thank
we
you.
wanna have him take the chains down on Friday?
I'm gonna leave that to Mike. Again, he has saved this county, the taxpayers, tremendous money by keeping that door closed. I think if anybody knows when is the right time to open it, it's Mike. So, I think every time the public asks the question of, hey, when's the door gonna be open? It is a great opportunity, Cheryl's still here, for us to say, Cheryl, we have saved you oodles and oodles of dollars by what Mike has done. So, I'd like to take that opportunity and,
Okay.
and use that to better communicate with the public
Okay.
and leave it to Mike. Anytime we can empower our employees, it gives them a hand in what we're doing.
So we will adjourn at 10:58.
Anything more for the agenda? Are we good with Wednesday for all this stuff?
I think so. I
Yeah.
don't think it's really, well, we say that,
Right?
but,
And then tomorrow morning, there's more.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
then I will take this to the team.
All right, I think we got